Welcome in, everybody. Chicago Sports Podcast, Monsters of the Madhouse. We're so happy to have you along with us tonight. And we got our guy, Brandon Hyatt, Trax Hyatt, the founder of Chicago Sports Podcast, and Dustin Jones. And guys, we're excited because 2 nights in a row now, man, we have a very special guest. Last night, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, which was a blast, which you guys can watch it on our YouTube channel and some of our past shows. But tonight we are going to be talking everything football, everything NFL, and everything Bears, because we're going to bring in our special guest, a guy that has been covering the league for a long time, not only covering the league, but talking about the Bears. He's got his podcast, a Sick Podcast, which covers everything about the Bears. Wrote a great piece that I read earlier today about the Minnesota Vikings, about the state of the 2024 Minnesota Vikings that I'd like to get into a little bit later as well. So welcome to the Madhouse, Mr. Adam Rank. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's happening? It's quite an honor to be following the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Everybody has a price. If I'm not mistaken, there were very few WWE superstars back in the day who never had a face run. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe Ted DiBiase was a face at some point. I can't recall it, but I think like him, Perfect, and Rick Rude were 3 guys who were never over as faces, which I think is pretty incredible, and I think it's a testament to their characters. So it's an honor to be in to be sharing a space with him, so to speak. And you guys as well. No disrespect to the 3 of you. But the $1 Million Man, you got to understand, like you guys are nice. We had a wonderful conversation in the green room, but like the $1 Million Man kind of supersedes. And I would expect the same thing had you done that on my show.
Well, we're going to end the show now. Thanks for having you. Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
$1 Million Man was super nice too. That guy was just a total gentleman. It was crazy. His interview was amazing.
I thought it was pretty cool that his grandkids kept coming in too. It was like his came in, and his grandkids came in. It was just man, it was just a lot of fun last night.
Yeah.
And we found out at the end of the show that he was a Bears fan. He had a Walter Payton helmet, right, guys?
Yeah, he had a signed Walter Payton helmet. At the end of the show, this wasn't even on camera. He says, "Hang on a second, guys." For me and Cleve that were on last night, and he comes back with this helmet. He's like, "Can you guys see this all right?" And then sure enough, you see it says the Walter Payton 34 man signed helmet that he got years ago, which was just cool to see that.
No, that's pretty awesome. I kind of remember him being a Bears fan, if I'm not mistaken. But he was one of those guys that I really enjoyed. And I heard like he's just a delightful person and everything. And I know his son. I actually really enjoyed when his son was up when they were doing the what was the name of the stable, Legacy.
Yeah, with Randy Orton.
With Randy Orton leading it. I always felt back in the day too, and this was my thing, and I don't know if it kind of counts now, but I always thought that Cody should have been the face. And I think that if Cody had gotten the diamond cutter, because I think the diamond cutter or the RKO is over more than Randy Orton's ever been over. As it's kind of like with oh God, what's the guy's name? The glorious guy. Bobby Roode. Like Glorious was over. Like he was never over. Like everybody just loved Glorious. Similarly, if Randy didn't get the RKO, and I'm like, this was me back in the day. You can ask my idiot friends who talk wrestling all the time. Like, why isn't Cody the leader? Like, like Dusty Rhodes was more charismatic than Ace Cowboy Bob Orton. So it just would have made sense that Cody should have been the leader. So I never understood that, but now we see Cody getting his opportunity to hold the title finally for the Rhodes family. So that's been amazing. But I'm going to have to go check that out. I'm going to look forward to go seeing that after we're done here.
How about last night, Brandon, too? Brandon, special guest last night, Eddie Payton, that joined the show, too, which was just hilarious to have him come on.
Well, Walter's brother. It was so cool. And then he's doing all those voiceovers like, "Oh, yeah, I'm going off the top of the ropes. I'm going to come get you some." I was like, he's loving it, man. 77 years old can still get down and have a good time,
Yeah. Didn't he have the kickoff return against the Lions on Thanksgiving years ago?
Yeah.
Am I remembering that correctly?
And you know what? If you ever get him on your show, it is like I could say, I don't know how we would both get in there, but if I could get in a phone booth, I would listen to him read out of the yellow pages. He's that entertaining, bro.
What's the yellow pages? We're losing the audience now. I hope everybody, like these kids, like just talking about things. I don't know. I spend too much time on. Well, it's funny because like spending time on TikTok, I was trying to explain to somebody
Yeah.
Because it was a joke about Dean. It was from one of Dean Martin's movies where he was playing Matt Helm, and the girl turns on the radio and it's a Frank Sinatra song. He's like, "Oh, that guy's terrible," and then they play a Dean Martin song. Like, this guy knows how to sing. It's a funny little joke. And then somebody was trying to say who would be Kendrick Lamar, and who would be Drake. And I'm trying to educate these people. Now, I don't think that I'm well enough aware of Drake or Kendrick Lamar. I think Kendrick Lamar is the one who ended up winning the whole thing. I'm like, Dean Martin, and again, in an attempt to just lose the entire audience of kids, Dean Martin was the one who was the coolest. Like, he was the one who was always like quippy, and it always drove Frank Sinatra crazy that he could never be as cool as Dean. Like, even to the point of like one night they switched lines because Dean was getting all the laughs. They switched the lines and Dean still got all the laughs. So it's interesting when you see stuff like this on TikTok, because I'm always curious about it, because it's like it is a young kids app, but then you can go in there and old it up as much as possible, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like Dean would be more of the Kendrick in that.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
I think. Yeah, because Drake is the Sinatra. He's the big face of rap and all that. Like, he's the and everybody who knows what's cool likes Kendrick.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah.
Damn it, I feel like lost right now. Like, if it's not like country in the country world right now, I'm like, all right, man. I'm like, I have no idea what about. It's funny, Adam. I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this yesterday, because she's a news reporter and a writer too, and we were just kind of like going back to our careers and how they started, and how she was like writing her articles in school and putting them out and stuff like that. Is it crazy to just go back to when you first started in this career, to your articles and what you were covering, to where it's at right now, where you were just talking about TikTok and going through all the different trends and getting your content out in such a rapid pace right now compared to when you first started? Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, it's painful to go back and look at some of those things that you used to write. And, I still got a couple of things that I wrote and did that I thought were enjoyable. And you're like, oh, this isn't great. And even on my Facebook page, I think it's Facebook. I rarely go on Facebook, but I have a story that I wrote about Pat Tillman that I'm constantly rewriting, because you're like, oh, because you're just improving, you're going back and tweaking. At some point I got to be like, I got to stop trying to rewrite this. But you do, like, you get a little bit more comfortable. And it's funny because I think over the last 5 years, it's been the first time in a long time where I've gone back and I've read stuff, because I wanted to go back and look at some things that I had written. And in particular, like talking about Justin Jefferson, because I remember doing my mock draft with a twist that season. And I remember, because my mock draft is always different. It's not a predictive piece. It's this is who you should pick piece. And I had Justin Jefferson going to the Eagles. I'm like, whatever you do, like, don't go with anybody else. Justin Jefferson is going to be the truth. And if he gets into the right situation, he is going to end up being the number one guy in this draft. And people are like, you're a clown. You don't know what you're talking about. And so, but I remember reading that and I'm like, this isn't terrible. Like, just not because like I got that right, but like the pros and everything of it all. You're like, oh, this is good. But yeah, when you go back and look at some of the stuff I wrote for the school newspaper, because I still have a lot of that stuff around somewhere. I'm like, oh my God, like, how did I graduate? How did somebody give me a degree and determine like this was good? I was actually a columnist at school, and I'm like, God, what people enjoyed it. Like, people thought it was great. And I'm like, oh, just looking back on it now, you're like, my writing was so bad. It's just got to be, it is interesting. And thinking about all the times covering high school sports, doing anything, because right now I'm a professor as well at Chapman University here in Orange, California, which incidentally, Matt Eberflus's daughter graduated from. Wow. So we always had that. We had that little connection. And so when I sit there and and you're talking to kids, you're talking to students, you're like, back in my day, and I'm sure it was the same for your girlfriend, like we would go and like cover high school sports, and you had to go back to the newsroom, and you put out 6 column inches, and it was almost like a Mad Lib where it's like, hey, Ruben Drone scored 4 touchdowns as Anaheim High School defeated Magnolia 44-0 at Glover Field in Anaheim, California. A lot of that stuff going on. And, doing blind, eventually going and doing blind, like trying to explain to people, these kids, what blogs were. And I'm like, yeah, like people used to actually read written words. Like I know it's weird and nobody can kind of fathom this anymore, but like, yeah, people would read the written word and are explaining to somebody, like, go explain to a 19-year-old what a magazine is. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah. It's like if you printed out a bunch of pages, a bunch of DMs, and you put it on glossy paper and you just read it. Like, it's been pretty incredible how much it's changed and how much, like, as somebody who's still trying to thrive and put out content, like how much you have to continue to change. Like I would have preferred to write magazines back in the 50s, but now, it's not that way anymore. So you got to go out there, and I'm making TikTok videos about Lad McConkey. Still getting to write a little bit, but yeah, it is a lot different. Not that it's worse or better or anything else. It's just different. And it's just one of those things where you just got to be willing to adapt and move on and just try to stay up with the trends, as the kids say.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're always our own harshest critics. So it's tough anytime. I'm sure we'll be looking back at this interview and be like, oh, damn, we sucked, 2 years from now.
You know what? I will do that with interviews as well. And there is some stuff. I actually, this year at the Super Bowl, I interviewed Akbar Bajabiamila, who obviously was on the NFL Network, who I'm a friend with. So it was a little bit easier, but I'm like, that was it. That was, if I was going to retire off an interview, that was finally the one where I think I was finally how I've always wanted to interview somebody. It was really good. Even like talking to Dr. Oz, like that was wild. And Carrot Top, you're like, oh, I feel like I'm starting to come along a little bit. But yeah, you're right. Like, but as a critic of your own work, like you, as you said, like you're always super critical and you're always harsh on yourself. So it's always tough for me.
So, hey, Adam, your writing style is like really hip, right? It's fast driven and flair to spare. Who inspired you to become the writer and journalist that you evolved to become?
Oh man, this is a good one, because when I was a columnist at school at Cal State Fullerton, I kind of stole the style for a little bit of Alan Malamud, who wrote this column called Notes on a Scorecard. And people might not realize this. If you ever watch White Men Can't Jump or a movie like Blue Chips, like he was an actor as well. Like he was in these movies. You'd be like, oh, and he was this great columnist who had this like simple form of doing it. And then I really took a shine to a guy named TJ Simers, which, as a matter of fact, over all the Angel bobbleheads over there,
that's awesome.
is a TJ Simers column about Tim Tebow. And so I really loved him as well, and really liked the way that he was a little bit more combative with people, but also in a good-natured way that it's hard to describe. He just recently passed away, so it was kind of a bummer. And actually, I usually, when somebody who means something to me passes away, I like to talk about it, but I couldn't. That was one where I'm just like, I'm not here yet. I don't know if I'll get through this right now talking about him, but just having that kind of style and sort of just like speaking how you talk, and just being like, you know what, maybe breaking some rules of journalism and maybe, doing things differently. I know that some people pick up that there's a lot of times that I don't refer to players by their last name, which is the standard, where you'd be like, this guy, I'll be like his first name, like, Justin. Like it's annoying. My editors, thankfully, at the NFL.com and the NFL Media Group allow me to go out there and do that. So I always refer to, it's usually like if it's somebody that I really like and admire, it's a first name thing. Like, hey, like, it's Caleb, or, anything like that, Walter, or actually, no, I would refer to him as Mr. Peyton, probably. But, and it's just, just something that I tried to develop over the years, and just broke a couple of rules and just leaned into my style. And, it's on camera as well. Cause I remember when I first started, we had a network person who tried to get everybody to sound the same. And it's like, listen, I'm not going to sound like Rich Eisen ever. Like that's just never going to happen. He's a total pros pro. Like he's got a style that you can't replicate. Don't make me try to do that, because I'm going to come off sounding stupid. So, you know what? It's just kind of like leaning into it. And I also, still do stand-up comedy. So you just kind of got to go after it and kind of just be true to yourself. It's like yourself, but amplified a little bit more. But, not being afraid to, and I think that by doing stand-up, it allows you to not be afraid. Like, it relieves your fear of taking risks. Like, thankfully we have editors, because sometimes they got to be like, dude, you can't talk, you can't say that. Like, no, we got to change that. So I think recently, well, as a matter of fact, the Vikings piece is out today. And then, of course, later this week, the Bears piece will come out. And it's called The State of the Franchise. And we're talking about the new faces of the Chicago Bears. And I hit on some of the high points. And I had, obviously Roma Dunze. We talk about, Caleb gets his own section. So like Roma Dunze, Keenan Allen. And then I had Simone Biles in there. And the editors were like, nah, we gotta throw back. We can't let you, because it's just such a slam on Green Bay. Because I said nobody was more excited to join the Bears than Simone Biles, who immediately was like, thank God I can get a direct flight to see my husband play football. And
Right.
She was going on and on. Like, you could tell she did not like Green Bay. And I felt sorry for her because she had to wear that. Because I always remember watching her. So I'm such a fan and being like, God, like, this poor lady's got to wear all this Green Bay. Like, she can't like this. She can't get into that. Like, it's not something that's natural. Like, nobody's like really a Green Bay fan. I always say this too. And I know people get upset. The kids online, but I'm like, nobody's like really a Green Bay fan. Like, nobody's had their feet held to the fire. Like, we see this right now. Like, you see this right now. Like, kids who grew up rooting for the New England Patriots. And if you're from the greater Boston area, you'll probably be a Patriots fan for life. Like, you're going to be a Patriots fan. That's the way it's going to be. However, if you were somebody who just started rooting for the Patriots because they were winning, then at some point you're going to be like, this team kind of sucks. What's going on, buddy? The game, what happened? The game started. Did Willie Calhoun do something? What happened? Okay, go find out what happened. The kids are watching the Angels game in the other room. So they're
I thought they wanted to talk about the Packers.
No, they know better. So they but like these Packers fans who are not from Wisconsin, because I always say, like, go, we're great fans. I'm like, where are you from? Like, Irvine? Like, okay, like, you've never had to truly test your fandom of whether you really love this team or not, because there hasn't been a bad stretch. There hasn't been an 8-year, 10-year stretch where your team's not very competitive. And then you go out there and you got to decide, like, hey, am I still backing this team or not? And so they've never been tested, and they might not ever be tested. Who knows? Jordan Love might be good. So I just think that it's really something unique. And so that's why I don't think that their fans are real. Whereas Chicago Bear fans, like, we always have to muster up optimism every year and never get rewarded for it. And that's what it's like to be a true fan.
Yeah, and I remember watching your schedule breakdown with the for the Bears when the schedule released, and I saw that optimism coming out in you. You were like, you ended up picking 12-5, I think, and you're like, holy shit, did I just pick 12-5? You're like, I got to go back and pick another loss here or there, because like,
no, I decided not to pick another loss. I'm like, we're good.
Yeah,
I know that
was great.
Greg Braggs picked the Bears to get swept by the Packers, and I'm like, I can't put that on my official record. I will.
Adam, that's my neighbor.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we're right down the street from each other. He's the one that got me started in this kind of. I just was like, I can't believe he's actually doing this, and then I was like, maybe I could do it. So yeah, Greg Braggs.
No, he's the best. And so we did this schedule breakdown together, and I'm like, I saw that. I understand where he's coming from, but I'm like, we shouldn't give too much respect to this guy, this team. Like, people are going a little too overboard with it. Like, they're fine. They're decent. Like, they're a good team, but I'm like, why are we just automatically assuming that they're going to be this? I know that Joe Barry was somebody who was, vilified by them, but it's like, your defense was still good last year. You guys just, I don't know. I think there's something to be said. I know that like there was some Instagram reel or some TikTok of some guy being like, yeah, like Jordan Love's right. Like, we don't need a number one receiver. They were better off with that one. I'm like, you know what? That's exactly what I've been thinking. I'm like, I watched the Packers over the years, and I'm like, you know what's holding this team back? Devontae Adams. Oh, get rid of Devontae Adams, and they would be amazing. This guy's killing them. It's a dumb thing. It really is. No, who's your guy? Like, who can you count on? Now, it's funny they say that because I'm like, Dontavian Wicks could develop into being a number one wide receiver. He's got that annoying quality, like my friend James Jones, where it's just like, God, because I tell James all the time, I'm like, you weren't a good NFL player. No, I'm just joking. He was fantastic. But it's like he was always like the backbreaker, the guy who you would watch and you'd be like, how does this guy, like, of course, it's 3rd and 8. This guy gets 9, which I'm hoping this season Keenan Allen is that player. Like, he's going to be that dude, and opposing fan bases going to be like, "Good, I really don't like that Keenan Allen." Like, Keenan Allen's been great for so long, but nobody dislikes him because there's been no reason to, because he's been a Charger. Like, who would hate a Charger? Like, name a hateable like, there's no reason to, like, why would I ever hate a Charger? You guys are the most innocuous team. And I say this as a Bears fan. Like, you're just like, you're just there. Like,
yeah, they've never broken any hearts. They've never broken any hearts.
No. It's not like you've never been like, I'm sick of the Charge. Like, no, it's never happened. And so Keenan's always been beloved. But I think this is going to be the season where people are going to be like, I sort of don't like Keenan Allen because he's so good. Not because he's a jerk. He's a good person.
Why did that whole experiment with Devontae and Carr didn't work out with the Raiders? Because they were so good together at Fresno State, you know? They set a bunch of records, man.
There was so much stuff going on there because Josh McDaniels was still there, and like, that was obviously a mistake, and that should have never happened. So not only do you have to have, that connection as a team. Devontae Adams was playing well. Again, you didn't watch that team and you're like, yeah, Devontae Adams is killing them. Like, he's ruining this whole offense.
You watched him and thought Carr was doing that, I think. In my opinion. I didn't think he was getting the ball out well enough with Devontae. I mean, it seemed like he lost something on his arm that year.
Yeah, I would have to go back and watch that. I'm still a big Derek Carr fan. I was excited when it felt like we almost had him that one time. Like, you think about the near misses. We've almost had Derek Carr. I don't know how close that came to being true, but like in the Russell Wilson thing. Yeah. So there's been a lot of near misses, which is why I'm really excited for Caleb Williams, obviously.
Yeah, we're all really excited for this year. And I mean, you've been covering the league for a long time. You've seen a lot of these Bears rebuilds get started and never really get finished, get crash and burn at the end of it, from John Fox to Matt Nagy, more recently. Do you think that Poles and Eberflus are doing it right this year? Do you think we're going to get that rebuild actually completed and be competitive?
Yeah, you know what? There's been a lot of interesting choices. Number one, I never would have hired. Did they hire? They hired Trestman over
Mark Trestman. Yeah,
hired Trestman over Bruce Arians, right? If I'm remembering this correctly.
Correct. Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure it wasn't the John Fox thing. So I never would have hired John Fox. Well, here's the interesting thing. Like, Bruce Arians was such an obvious choice. Like, it was so wild to me. I like Trestman, like, as a human being, but I'm like, it was so insane to me. Like, Bruce Arians, who just won Coach of the Year, you don't want this guy to coach your team. Like, well, I don't understand any of this. Like, he was the obvious choice. So that was a misfire. John Fox, the Bears had never hired a retread coach. It was always somebody new, going back from Ditka to Dick Duran to Lovey and all these guys. There were always like a first-time head coach. And I think that was something cool that the Bears always did, is just never go to a retread. And then when they did, they're like, we're getting John Fox. You're like, John Fox? This is who, like, if you did it for Belichick, like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like, I'm in on this. But John Fox, I'm like, oh. So there's been some terrible coaching hires over the years, but this is why I think that the Bears situation is different. And I understand, and there's people and there's reasons to go out there for people to say, like, we've been here before. Like, yeah, it's true. Like, you're absolutely right. We've tried to do this time and time again, but this is why it's going to be different. Number one is the organization is now mostly run by football people. They have Ryan Poles in there, and this is and in truth, this is something that Ryan Pace wanted, is that he wanted an assistant GM, and they're like, no, you got Ted Phillips. Why would you need an assistant GM? But they finally realized, no, we need to join the modern NFL, and we're gonna get an assistant GM, Ian Cunningham, who's probably going to go out there and get us a 3rd round pick this year when he's hired away. And then Ted Phillips steps aside, and Kevin Warren comes in, who is a football person. I don't think that he's making any of the football decisions in regards to player personnel or anything like that, but you got another football person in there helping them try to attain a brand new stadium. And so that, again, is another forward-thinking thing that the Bears have not done in 100 years. So you love that part of it as well. You're like, okay, now we're cooking. They're going to be on Hard Knocks, and I know a lot of the olds will be out there, be like, oh, it's a distraction. Like, these kids are out there with their phones recording themselves. They've grown up in front of cameras. Like, it's not a distraction. Stop saying that. You sound ridiculous. So please stop with that. So they got that. And then the whole situation with Caleb Williams. Now there is a chance that Caleb Williams doesn't translate to the NFL. He's not a good NFL quarterback. We've seen it happen before. What you can't deny is that they've put a team around him that almost makes it not idiot proof, but like you would have to be pretty bad for this not to work. With DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze, and now even Gerald Everett, bringing back the old guy. Like, even now, they wouldn't even overlook the 3rd tight end. Like, a lot of teams would be like, 3rd tight end thing. Nope, we're not messing around. We're going to bring back Mercedes Lewis because we need to make sure that at least all the way down to the 3rd tight end is going to help our quarterback win. And we've already started by naming him the starting quarterback, which people are like, yeah, no, duh. I'm like, no. Look at what happened when we drafted Mitch Trubisky. He had to deal with Mike Glennon. Look what happened with Justin Fields. He had to deal with Andy Dalton and Nick Foles. Like, no, we usually don't turn the offense over to the quarterback. We make him go through the motions of like, will he or won't he be the starting quarterback, even though we know the guy in front of him is not very good. So then you have a team that is ready to compete right now. The defense looks good. And again, I think there is a hole that people will recognize with the edge rusher. But if the Mercedes Lewis thing shows you anything, it's like Ryan Poles is paying attention. He knows what he needs to do. We don't need to remind him. Kevin Fishbane, you don't need to write an article or anything like that. We're sorry. Leave him alone. He knows this well enough. Nick Moriano, he's got it. Like, don't leave him alone. He knows what he's doing. And this team is so ready to win, even to the point too. And somebody was like, well, what if Caleb's a bust? I said, if this doesn't work out, you would be in a position where 2-3 years from now, if Caleb wasn't working out, where you could go out there and get, and I'm not saying these particular players, but like over the last season, like the Buccaneers brought in Baker Mayfield and they won the division. Like, you would have your team in a position to do that if somehow Caleb wasn't the guy. But I'm pretty confident that Caleb is the guy. This would be a huge miss. This isn't like, sometimes you draft a quarterback and you're like, I hope Tim Couch is good. Like, you knew that. Like, he played at Kentucky. Like, there was a lot of question marks. Baker, I think even Baker was a stretch. Like, you're just trying to make Baker Mayfield seem good. I think Caleb Williams is one of those guys along the lines of Trevor Lawrence, who is, again, when people, I always love it when people are like, oh, don't, like, the last generational talent was Trevor Lawrence. How's that working out? I'm like, two back-to-back 4,000-yard seasons, a playoff win 2 years ago. I think it's fine. I think Trevor Lawrence has worked out.
Yeah.
I think Andrew Luck has worked out. He is of that line. Like, that is what he is. He's not he's not a Bryce Young. I hope he's good. This is a generational guy that we've looked at over the last couple of years have expected him to be the number one pick, not a like, well, we got to pick a quarterback first. Bryce Young, I guess, Baker. Okay, fine. Mark Sand, whoever it is. So former Bear, by the way. I think that this is going to work out. I'm very confident. I know, again, people are like, you've been confident before. I'm like, but this really feels different.
Yeah, it does. I agree.
Adam, we're talking to Adam Rink right now, Monsters of the Madhouse, and we talk about Caleb Williams and the future. And I think all of us that we've talked on our shows here on the Madhouse.
There's like 6 chargers downstairs, dude. You can't find one charger. Not a single one. Go ask your sister to hook you up. I think your mom's phone's down there anyway.
You didn't have your chargers ready.
There's like 6. There's literally 6 chargers.
I love it. And if you go find it too, you'll see it right away. Oh
my God. Once he goes down there, actually, if I got a work phone, I don't know where that is. He's fine. The boy's actually the one that I don't need to worry about being on the screen too much because he likes to go out and play sports. He's watching the Angels game right now. He would be on this Kindle for 2 minutes anyways, and then he gives up and he just goes and
they get distracted. Go watch the Angels game again.
Yeah, just go watch the Angels, buddy.
Yeah. Adam, we're talking about Caleb Williams, so I want to ask you this too because we've talked about it a lot on our shows here on Monsters of the Madhouse, especially leading up to it, because I thought it was such a hot topic with all the Chicago fans between Justin Fields and then we're going to draft the number 1 quarterback. So ultimately, from the people that you've talked to, what made that decision, like all the things built in between the other quarterbacks being in the draft that they went ahead with Caleb Williams? And did you think even some of the other quarterbacks in the draft were picked a little bit higher?
I really do believe that if Caleb, like if the Bears had missed out on, let's say Carolina had won like 5 games or whatever, I don't think that the Bears would have. I don't know if they necessarily would have picked another quarterback. There are people who think that perhaps they would have gone with somebody else. What's going on? Isn't that your brother's?
No, it's mine.
It's yours. It's not for your brother. Can you do it tomorrow? It's 7:00 right now. Can you wait and do it tomorrow? What is it, painting?
Yeah.
I swear to you, if you spill paint, you're going to be in trouble.
I'm going to play.
All right. Do your thing. Enjoy it. Sorry about that.
Just don't get down the charger,
right? She gave up her charger. Now she's painting. So, which is very nice of her. She's like, okay, I'll do this thing. I think Caleb was a generational talent and I'm curious if they would have traded up for him, if they would have tried to have moved it. Now, if the Commanders had the first overall pick, I don't think they would have budged off Caleb Williams. I don't think any team who drafted a quarterback would have budged off Caleb Williams. So I think it was Caleb Williams and then a pretty significant drop. I've heard varying reports from people who are in the inside, so to speak, who are like, the Bears definitely would have drafted a quarterback regardless. And then there are people who are like, they might have gone back to Justin Fields. But I think that, as much as I like Justin and I back Justin and I'm rooting for him in Pittsburgh, the organization, according to some people who I've talked to, they said that the organization made the decision during the year, like, this isn't going to work. And so it's funny because like as many of us in the pro Justin camp were like, yeah, this is all, listen, you go out there, you get trade down, get Marvin Harrison Jr., go do this, get millions of draft picks and everything. I don't think the Bears ever, I don't think the Bears ever had that in mind. And I think that there were a couple of instances during the season. You look at the game against the Minnesota Vikings and the way that Brian Flores was able to fluster him. You look at what the Packers did to him in week 18, and it not that it comes down to 2 games, but I think that they were kind of in a position of like, perhaps if he had been developed a little bit better, if we would have gotten a hold of him a little bit quicker, made a better hire at offensive coordinator, things could have been different. But unfortunately, things being what they are, the way that the NFL economics works, it just makes more sense to restart and to go back over. And there are people too who did not have Jaden Daniels as the number 2 quarterback on the Bears board, but I have not heard that directly from Ryan Poles, so I won't speak on that. But I think Caleb Williams is the guy, and I think that he does a lot of things very well, and he's very special. And it's funny too, because when you think about the situation Justin walked into, and Justin walked into a spot where you could, and I know that Allen Robinson was coming off a big year, but you could reason, you could say that Justin Fields' wide receiver room during his final year at Ohio State was better than his wide receiver room with the Chicago Bears. I don't know how many, I don't think there's much of an argument. Like, those guys were fantastic. This is this is the opposite for Caleb Williams. Like, Caleb Williams was the only quarterback drafted in the first round who did not have a wide receiver from his team go in the first 5 rounds. Like, who was he playing with? Like, Jaden Daniels could be the next Justin Fields in the fact, like, his receiving room is worse in the pros than it was in college. And so I think that we're going to get a chance to see what Caleb Williams can do. And I think that it's kind of ridiculous where what was the hell nah video out of context? Whatever. I'm not going to worry about one pass.
I know.
I'm not going to worry about one pass in training camp. Like, I remember a couple of years ago where everybody was trying to convince me that Jamar Chase couldn't catch a football anymore. So I think
it's so overrated to me. And people just bringing up pass. I feel like that's the beauty of X or Twitter or whatever it is now, that some of that stuff will get brought up and then you think it's going to be worrisome, but a lot of times it's just not.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you overanalyze all of it when it comes to something like this, especially being the Bears, and we haven't had a quarterback in this city that's really been any good for so long.
Yeah.
You really put a lot of weight on it. So, like, and it's been 80 years since we've had a franchise quarterback, some would say. I mean, I don't
come on. Jay Cutler was a good quarterback.
I thought so too. I thought people gave him a little too much heart. I thought he was better than what everybody else on the outside said about him.
Yeah, I mean, that Bears team got all the way to the NFC Championship game. I think there were some mistakes made, hiring Mike Martz. I think hiring Mike Martz. Also, when you went out there and traded Greg Olson, I think that was a mistake too.
Terrible decision.
Are you painting as well, buddy?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Listen, you got your pajamas on. You've taken a shower already. Don't make me regret this, okay? Okay.
World-class parenting with Adam Rank.
How's the Angels game going? What were you guys screaming about earlier then?
Angels having a tough year too.
Nothing. How about the paint?
You should be able to get the paint out now. Here. Let me see it. There it is. Yeah, you can get it out right here, bud. All right, be careful. No spillage. Look at me. No spillage.
So
say hi to everybody. Come here, say hi.
Hey. I want to go watch the Angels game.
That's
Angels,
true.
even though I got my White Sox hat, I said the Angels are having a tough year. My White Sox.
I was gonna say you're not much to talk.
Even all the way down here in Knoxville right now, man. People make fun of me when I wear my hat, and they're like, "Man, Sox fans exist," and I'm like, "Yeah, we there's some of us out there."
Oh, stop! You guys, listen. I still remember 2005.
Never forget.
And Pierzynski, like, just spring, like I credit to him for just running. I know that a lot of people get rid of, like, I still think Doug Eddings still called him out. Like, he still went through the motion and rung him up and got fooled by that. I still won't excuse Josh Paul for just throw the ball to first base. Who cares? Just you're done. Throw it anyways. Even if you think you caught it, just throw the ball to first base. This is over with. And it was so sickening because that was such a great Angels team. They had switched Kelvin Escobar to the bullpen. So it was very difficult. If the Angels had a lead from the 7th inning on, it was very difficult to beat them. But at the same time, I mean, had they won game 2, then you go back to Anaheim up 2-0. I know that White Sox team was very good. Their pitching was incredible. I don't know. The tenor changes a little bit. If you lose both games to start a series, I don't know how that plays out, but we'll see. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Josh Paul, former White Sox player too.
Of course, he's still playing for the White Sox there.
And that was the one team I was afraid of too. Yeah.
Should have been. Well, I mean,
the Red Sox that year too.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, those were, and that was the thing too. Those were the clearly the 2 best teams in baseball that season. Like the Astros were going to get walked over which they were, right? You guys swept them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that they did. They did. It was the Angels. Yeah, like I said, that was the one team I was concerned about the entire run.
And that's the whole thing. I'm like, oh, I hope we don't play the White Sox, but I still felt confident. That's a bummer.
But that's something I always remember, man. That's to this day, us Sox fans, we hold on to that. And that's part of this. Even with all the stuff that we're going through right now, you still got back. I still got all that stuff hanging in my living room and stuff.
But it had to be painful when the Cubs won the World Series because you had that to hold over their heads, being like, "Oh yeah, like you guys haven't won a World Series. When was that?" Because we do that out here. I know the Dodgers won that extended spring training thing in Texas in 2020, and I'm like,
60-game season. Yeah,
I laugh at that because this year they won the spring training title, and I'm like, are they going to get rings for that? Like, what do you mean? Like, don't equate that to. I'm like, that's the same thing. It's the same thing. The Dodgers. Listen, if you're a poverty franchise like the Padres, and I even say this about the Lakers too. I'm like, why are the Lakers and Dodgers? It's embarrassing that you're celebrating these. It's not like you're the Clippers or the Padres. Like those are teams that should celebrate those weird titles. And I guess like it's common practice for the Dodgers because they won that season. They won in 81 with a strike shortened season where the best team in baseball didn't even make the postseason, the Cincinnati Reds. And so like, yeah, I guess it's a Dodger thing. Like, yeah, anytime there's some quirky, it's like, when there's an Academy Award winner who's like been shut out for years and there's no real good person, like, we'll just give it to Jack Palance or whomever it is. Like, he's been around for a while. Like, let's give it to him.
Was it the World Series?
The Lakers celebrated that in-season tournament title like they won the damn finals.
I feel like that was a directive from the NBA. I will give the Lakers a pass on that because I guarantee you Adam Silver is like, because I'm sure the Lakers have been like, because if you ever go to the Staples Center or Crypto or whatever, they don't hang up their division titles. They don't hang up their conference titles either. It's like world championships or nothing. And I think Adam Silver's like, dude, you got to pretend like this was something cool. So they're like, fine, we'll put it up here over by the, there's like the LA Blades of the indoor hockey league, of the inline roller skating league. Like it has a banner somewhere. Actually, no, like there's some entertainers who have banners for whatever reason. It's Staples. Can't remember who it is. There's two of them. It's been so long. I haven't been there in a while.
I've never been.
I was just thinking about that. As we're going to get back to the Bears in a second here, but I've thought about that Dodgers World Series for a second. Wasn't that the one where Justin Turner ran onto the field without the mask, and then he ended up having COVID, and everybody started like getting in an uproar around that?
Yeah, and then Tommy Lasorda dies a couple of weeks later.
Yeah,
I'm like, does anybody ever talk about that? Like Justin Turner had COVID, and then Tommy Lasorda dies of COVID 2 weeks later. Hey,
there's a lot we don't talk about from that.
There's a World Series.
Yeah, I always remember that too, man.
It was
ridiculous. I was embarrassed for the Dodgers. I mean, I guess like if you're Clayton Kershaw and you've choked your entire postseason career, like, yeah, you might as well go celebrate one. Like there's always a great debate. And I always find it fascinating. This always plays well when I'm talking to the 49er fans. It was like Madison Bumgarner, like do people not think that he's better than Kershaw? Like, no, like Kershaw's. I'm like, Kershaw, if it's late August and you're playing the Colorado Rockies in a midweek August game, there's no pitcher in the world history that I'd rather have than Clayton Kershaw. But if you're in a must-win baseball playoff World Series, whatever, not even the divisional title, like give me Madison Bumgarner. People are like, wow, the Astros cheated. I'm like, no. You guys lost at home. Like you lost at home. Like I see the photos. The Astros are celebrating at Dodger Stadium. Like you guys lost. And by the way, Joey Cora, I don't know if this has changed, but back in the day, Joey Cora is the one who was like the mastermind of all this stuff. When you looked at his page back on Baseball Reference back in the day, he was wearing a Dodger hat. Like, yeah, I figured. Like the Dodgers The Dodgers turn every journeyman. Speaking of Justin Turner, every journeyman who's about out of the league shows up with the Dodgers and starts hitting 30 home runs. And you're like, oh, that's weird. Like Justin Turner was like released by the Mets and the Reds and a couple of teams. Who the F is Max Muncy? Like all of a sudden, like you're hitting 40 home runs now. Like what? Like nobody ever questions this. Like, what do you think is happening with the Dodgers? Who is running their pharmaceutical department? Well, at some point they'll get caught for it and they'll blame Ipe. They'll be like, "That was it was Ohtani's translator." Like, well, he wasn't here when it's just Ohtani's translator. I guarantee it.
You Darvish come out with pitches.
Yeah.
Oh man, you know we have you for a couple more minutes here, Adam. Thanks for coming on tonight too.
I spent too much time talking about things other than the Bears. I apologize to everybody.
You know, listen, I could talk baseball all day long, man. Especially when we start talking about some of those World Series and going back to it, and the Yu Darvish tip and pitch, like all that stuff was fascinating to me at that time too.
Oh, tipping the pitches, and by the way, I always say this too. I was saying this over the weekend because we went on Sunday. Angels playing host to the Astros. Angels went on a Logan O'Hoppe walk-off home run. And so there was somebody, I'm like, we were talking about this I was talking about this with one of the ushers. Like, hey, like they said something about the Astros allegedly cheating. And I said, you know what? Okay. Even if that's the case, even if that's true, the teams they were cheating against were the Dodgers, the Yankees, and the Red Sox. It's like,
it's pretty damn good.
It's kind of like to me, it's kind of like watching Dexter. Like, yeah, like he is a serial killer. Like, I'll give him that. Like, he probably shouldn't be murdering, but like, look at who he's murdering. You're like,
kind of rooting for him.
I'm sort of rooting for him in that way. Like, I get it. It didn't affect me because the Angels are terrible, so it doesn't matter. So I'm good with it. Although then you start looking into like, were they doing this during the regular season? There was a year where the Angels missed out of the playoffs by one game, and it was a game we lost to Houston where Featherstone got a ball caught in his glove. Like, would have ended the game. Got the ball caught into his glove, extends an inning, 3-run home run. You're like, oh my God, like this, the dumbest things, this cursed franchise. Yeah, it doesn't give me hope. You know what I'm sitting there? Because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about all the teams I also root for Arsenal. It's like, God, like why? Like, I just don't want to be happy when it comes to sports. I think that's
why we want to be miserable, because that's what you do. You be miserable and then you talk about the misery with all the other fans, and that's how you get everybody riled up. Yeah, that's just sports in general.
No, Adam, like you said with the Packers, those fans haven't.
They don't know what that's like.
Felt that pain for that long, like a real fan base has.
Like I would be downright morose if I was a fan of a team that had as much, like that had Hall of Famers that didn't win as many titles. Like Eli Manning has more Super Bowls, as many Super Bowls as Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Even Jim McMahon has, Jim McMahon's won as many Super Bowls with the Packers as Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. And I know that like they're like, God, but they were great days and it was fun. I'm like, I get it. That's true. But it's like, and similarly, like, 85 was fun for some people. I barely remember it, but still.
I barely remember it too.
Yeah, no, I want some new memories because I wasn't even born yet. I'm kind of sick of hearing about it. I want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Well, I think every Bears fan is sick of hearing about the 85.
Everybody, we would love to close. This would be, and I know it's probably not going to, it might not happen this season. Maybe it will. Who knows? It would be perfect if Mongo McMichael, when he goes into the Hall of Fame, and then the Bears win the Super Bowl, then you could kind of close the book on 85.
Yeah.
Because I think Mongo was one of the last remaining pieces of like, once he gets in, then I feel like everybody who's going to get in is going to get in. I'm sure somebody will come up and be like, no, you forgot about Wilbur Marshall or I don't even know who else. I don't know. Gary Fensick or whomever.
Yeah.
But I think Mongo's the last. I think once we have Mongo in, you're like, okay, we have a pretty fair representation of that 85 team. And then then you could get the Super Bowl, and then we could close the book on that. And then we don't have to talk about it anymore, except for our older family members who want to sit here and be like, this was the greatest team of all time. Yeah, I'm with you. I would just like to see it in 2024, 2025,
No doubt.
whatever.
Yeah.
I think a 60-year-old dad is even sick of talking about it. So I think we all want. I think we're all ready for that. And Adam, before we let you go tonight, I was reading your article.
What happened to the guy from Fresno? Did he just bounce? Did I offend? Did I walk him?
He was dealing with some family issues.
Okay. I hope he's okay. I hope everything's all right.
He's going to be all right. Yeah, we appreciate you. But yeah, he just had to jump off and take care of some stuff. So,
I earlier today I read about the Vikings, the state of 2024 Minnesota Vikings. You're talking about, when does JJ McCarthy take over? They overhauled the pass rush, and I just want to get your opinions about the NFC North in general. I think the Vikings are a very interesting team. I feel like that's a team in transition, but yet even with those quarterbacks they had last year, they were very competitive. Yeah. Great defensive coordinator. And I think the coaching, if you look at the coaching in general in the NFC North with LaFleur in Green Bay, and then I think one of the biggest things for me is Ben Johnson going back to Detroit. It's going to be a very competitive division, and that was a very good, well done article. Especially, is Sam Darnold going to take over? Is he going to be week 1 starter there, or is it going to be
good?
In that offense, he could be.
Yeah, I wonder what happens if he just really goes in there and starts playing well, or if he gets Eli'd out of his job, or Kurt Warner. Like when Kurt Warner was playing with the Giants, and they were actually, I think, 5-4 when they finally benched him and went with Eli. Sam Darnold could find himself in a very similar situation. I liken the Vikings season. I think it'll be very similar to what happened last year, where they're very competitive. They're pretty good. Brian Flores will scheme up and let them and have them competitive in some games. And they're just going to have some growing pains with the quarterback position. Aaron Jones is great. How healthy is he going to be? Aaron Jones will be great for 2 games next year, I know. How healthy is he going to be? How will they really be able to run the football? And I don't think that it's damning for them to say, you guys probably aren't going to win the division. And I believe I have them predicted to win 7 games. It's it's going to be very similar. This division's good. It's not like the Texans last year. Because I know everybody will be like, well, the Texans won last year with a rookie quarterback. And you're like, yeah, but it was the South. The Titans ended up firing their quarterback, or firing their head coach. The Colts lost Anthony Richardson. The Jags had a pretty historic collapse. The Jags were running away with that division. Had they won one other game down the stretch, and it was almost inexplicable for them not to, then we wouldn't have been talking. Yeah, we wouldn't have been talking about the Jags, or we wouldn't have been talking about the Texans as much. So I think the Vikings are going to be good. And I think as long as they have KOC, they're going to be good. And if they can keep Flores for another couple of years, then they're going to be fine. They'll get there. They're building it right now. I thought losing Hunter will hurt, but they're okay.
Yeah, they're very well coached, especially offensively with Kevin O'Connell. Do you think JJ McCarthy can turn into a competitive quarterback in this division, competing with Caleb Williams on a year-to-year basis?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
What do we have with JJ McCarthy? Are we looking at, I think it comes down to, are we looking at the next Tom Brady, or are we looking at the next Mac Jones? What are we getting here? Because there's something we said, hey, he didn't get a lot of opportunity to throw the football when he was at Michigan, but and sometimes those quarterbacks come in, you're like, oh wow, he's better than we thought, and he's an excellent quarterback. Tom Brady did this. I mean, Tom Brady was splitting time with Drew Henson back in the day because there were some recruiting promises made and things of that nature. It's so funny because how different college football was back in the day. Now, Tom Brady would have left immediately, gone somewhere, probably gone to Texas or something, or Cal, and done very well for himself, and probably been drafted in the, much higher. But in any event, I think McCarthy is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. I don't think that we're looking at this rare gem of a quarterback who's going to go out there. Although I've heard about some teams that had him very high on their board and really liked him. So it'll be interesting. I don't think it'll be I don't think it's possible for him to have a Mac Jones type failure, because outside of the Bears, because the Bears get a lot of the headlines, and rightfully so, for getting DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Roma Dunze, Tyler Scott, Cole Kmet, all those guys. The Vikings have a pretty good, they have a pretty good receiving room as well. You think of Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson to go with TJ Hawkinson, who's probably going to miss a couple of games, but you know what? Like they've really surrounded him with a lot of great receiving help as well. So I think he will be successful, and he could probably be a Kirk Cousins type player where you're like, yeah, okay, like we'll win some games, but is he a Super Bowl winning quarterback? That remains to be seen.
And then Adam, do you think this is it for Aaron Rodgers this year? I think the other team that's very compelling to me is the Jets, just because of everything that happened last year with the coaches and Zach Wilson and the quarterbacks, then Aaron coming back this year. Is this it for him, or it's pretty much it's it, or it's going to be it for the coaching staff if they don't win games?
Yeah, which is really interesting because I thought during the draft season, when they had an opportunity to go after Brian Thomas Jr., I thought they should have made that move. They drafted a lineman who will be very good, but they signed 2 veteran guys to win right now because Robert Saleh is not getting the benefit of the doubt if this team doesn't make the playoffs. So it is interesting the way they sort of loaded up for this season. And I don't know if it's going to be a situation where the next quarterback is going to be, it's going to benefit greatly from what they've got going on out there. It is it'll be wild to see how it goes because I really love this roster. I think it's really good. And when I was doing my predictions, I did temper my expectations a little bit. Still have them making the playoffs. I might have had them winning the division. If I went back and looked at it closely. Well, they're all good, the Dolphins and the Bills are good teams. I think that the Patriots are going to be dreadful. So I look at that team and they're very compelling to me with a win now coach. And what happens with Aaron Rodgers? Does he get them to the playoffs? Does he get them to the Super Bowl? Would he ride off into the sunset? Does he have the desire to continue to play like Tom Brady did? I know that Tom Brady's last year in Tampa Bay was sort of a disaster, but still, like, there's a real desire. I don't know that Aaron Rodgers is made the same way as Tom Brady. I think that's one thing that people kind of underestimated with Tom Brady over the years is like how much he grinded and how much he went through it. And I know that people will look at it and they'll be like, well, if Aaron Rodgers played for the Patriots, like would he? I'm like, I don't think he would have had the success. I don't think he was the kind of guy that would have thrived under Bill Belichick. I think that we're really selling Tom Brady short when we start talking about things like that, because I think there was something about Tom Brady that made him different. Going down to Tampa Bay should have kind of, erased all the doubts on that, where you're like, you know what? Tom Brady is the GOAT. Let's not even worry about this. I thought it was interesting what somebody said a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. I forget who it was. Was it a Ram? Was it somebody there who was like, if Matthew Stafford had played for the Packers, probably would have had more Super Bowls than Aaron Rodgers. And I'm like, this I can get behind.
I didn't see that.
Somebody said that, and it's somewhere in my Twitter timeline, because I'm like, I see no lies. Like I've been saying this as well. Like if Matthew Stafford had been drafted by the Packers, I truly believe he would have won at least 2 Super Bowls, maybe even 3. You look at some of the near misses. Matthew Stafford, to me, is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL of his era. I really don't think when the Rams won, I asked somebody, I said, he's a Hall of Famer now? People are like, I don't know. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, he has as many NFC championships and Super Bowls now as Favre and Rodgers, and he's been playing in terrible situations. I thought that was kind of an exclamation point of like, see, you put this guy in the proper situation. Not old Detroit, and this is new Detroit's a completely different thing. I'm not slamming the new version of the Lions, but I think that was pretty telling. And by the way, that's another thing too. When people talk about like the Bears organization, about why now, why is this different? Last year, the Lions had to go through that, and the Lions had to listen to a lot of the, oh, you're still the Lions. Like you had a nice run, but you're still the Lions, LOL, and all that stuff. And they went out and they proved it. And so I think the Bears are also in a very similar spot right now and can go out and do the same thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I know the answer to this question, but you see the Bears in the playoffs this season based on what you see right now with these rosters in the NFC North?
100%. It's going to be difficult. But last
yeah.
year, I mean, again, I've said this time and time again. The Bears won 7 games last year. Like, that's a 7-win team that Caleb Williams is joining that got significantly better. And not only were they a 7-win team, they lost 3 games where they had a 90% chance of winning late in the fourth quarter. We're not able to hold it off. If that changes, I mean, like last year, like if they would have won those games, and again, this is not like, if they would have won those games, they would have gone into week 18 not even needing to beat Green Bay. Green Bay wouldn't have been able to catch them. And they would have sat Justin. It would have been really interesting to see what would have happened during the offseason, because they would have sat Justin Fields in week 10. Well, they would have sat him in week 8. What would have been interesting is if they would have sat him in week 18 and then Tyson Bagent goes out and beats the Packers in a game that didn't matter. There's a lot of like interesting little things that could have gone on, but I truly believe that the situation lends itself to the Bears making the playoffs. And even if Caleb Williams throws for just 3,000 yards and 25 touchdowns, that should be good enough. Because and we haven't even mentioned DeAndre Swift about how good he is. So I
think weapons we have,
yeah. This team is loaded and should win double-digit games, no problem.
We're with Adam Reagan, and thank you for coming on Monsters of the Madhouse tonight. You kind of alluded to it earlier about what you are working on. We were talking about the Vikings piece that you wrote earlier today, but you also said you got a Bears one coming up too.
Yeah, I do one for all 32 teams. So we've already run through 8 of them. This was the 9th one that dropped today. So we'll do the entire NFC North this week. Next week will be the NFC South, and then we'll switch over to the AFC. So I go through all 32 teams. And of course, I've done my traditional preseason predictions that we're working on right now. There's been a lot of changes at the NFL Network, so we weren't able to do the fancy screen like we've done over the last number of years. We had to kind of go back like we did during the COVID time, and I filmed it at home. And our hardworking team is on the clock putting that together, so that'll drop here in the near future. So something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're not that far away, man. Like
not at all.
Next month training camp, and it's gonna be here sooner than we know. Like that's what I love about this time of the year.
Absolutely.
We're already having you on to talk about all this, man. Talk about the Bears. Talk about everything NFL. They got a lot of us excited. You got a lot of people excited in the chat too. Yeah, I've noticed in the chat there's a lot of people that hate the Jets. There's a couple of things I've noticed. We don't like the Jets, the Packers, and are questioning if the Lions are going to win the division again this year.
The Lions are a good team.
I still think they're going to. I still think, especially with Johnson being back there, I think they're going to be even more dangerous with the third year of that offense too.
But they really need Carlton Davis to play well. They need Terrion Arnold to be the guy that we think that he is. And if those guys perform, the Lions, I mean, regardless, they should make the playoffs. But yeah, I would think it would be an automatic slam. I'm not going to say that because I picked the Bears to win the division. But yeah, the Lions will make the playoffs again. Look, double-digit wins. They're making the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. I have a question for you, Adam, fantasy related. Have you done any rankings yet? Have you looked into where you would be ranking Caleb Williams going into this season amongst the quarterbacks?
Yeah, if you go onto my TikTok page or Instagram, I've been doing a prospect a day for the month of June. So we're going through all the rookies to help you get ready for dynasty drafts and things of that nature. I talk a little redraft there. I have Caleb Williams as he's somewhere around quarterback 13.
Oh, really?
A player that I would like to have if I have Patrick Mahomes or even Kirk Cousins, like somebody that I'd love to have on my roster, but I'm not going to do those things. So a lot of people like to wait on quarterbacks. And if they do, I probably wouldn't risk it with Caleb Williams because I think they could end up running the ball a lot this year, which might negate some of his fantasy potential. But I think if you're in a dynasty league, if it's a super flex that allows you to flex a quarterback, which means you're essentially starting 2 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams would be the 1.01 for me. If you're playing in a traditional dynasty setup, I would have the 3 top wide receivers going off the board. I'd have Brock Bowers at about number 4, and then you'd have a conversation at number 5 whether you're going to go with Caleb, Ladd McConkey, or Brian Thomas Jr. I would probably go for the quarterback depending on your situation. But still, somebody you need to have on your roster for sure.
Oh yeah,
Cool.
it was good.
Yeah, that's coming up too. We start talking about drafts and mock drafts and stuff like that for fantasy football. So Adam Rank, man, we appreciate your time tonight. Monsters of the Madhouse here on the Chicago Sports Podcast. The Sick Podcast, the Bears podcast, you guys can check that out with Adam too. And we appreciate you, man. We appreciate everything coming on and everything you've done for us, man.
No, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. It was a good time tonight. And tomorrow on if you're not familiar, we do with the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank every Wednesday at 7 Eastern. We do Take It to the Rank, where it's a Q&A. Probably not a lot of Q&A tomorrow. We're gonna have Aaron Nagler, noted Packers fan, to kind of get an outsider's perspective, and then we'll be joined later on by Sean Merriman, who would just once again trying to get a little bit of an outside perspective. So yeah, if you want to check it out tomorrow, you can find us on YouTube and everything like that, and Instagram, all the social medias. But if you find us on YouTube, you could like and subscribe and do all that stuff. You don't ever have to watch it; just subscribe. That would be
just hit the subscribe button. Yeah, like our show, guys. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. You don't have to watch anything. Just you
don't have to watch it. That's what I'm saying.
Sorry,
I spend a lot of time trying to I try to subscribe to as many podcasts as possible. I do like to listen to them, but yeah, try to subscribe to as many as possible. Help everybody out.
Yeah, that's what I love about the podcast. The podcast community in general, man. Everybody get together, whether it's sports, wrestling, whatever you guys choose. That's what we're all here together. So we appreciate it, Adam. So you guys check that out tomorrow night, the Sick Podcast, and you guys can check out our show too, the Monsters of the Madhouse YouTube channel. We interviewed the $1 Million Man last night, Ted DiBiase, which was awesome. You guys can check that out. Other past shows too on our YouTube channel and this show as well. So, Adam, thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you. And, really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, man. You're an awesome dad. It was so cool to see that.
You're too kind.
Enjoy the Angels and find those Chargers for them, all right?
Yeah, buddy. They're fine.
And get those
That's the best parenting ever. They're fine.
Yeah.
And Dustin, thank you, man. It's good to see you tonight.
Matt, you too, man.
And everybody else in the chat room. And thank you guys so much for watching. And we'll talk to you guys soon for Monsters of the Madhouse, Chicago Sports Podcast.